the video catch up to the audio. I notice it takes about a good 10 seconds. I don't know why it does that, but it just does. Hi, Ray Dickey from Association Help Now, South Carolina CAI and Hudson Valley CAI. We cover a lot of different states. Thank you so much for being here today. I think this is going to be, can I say it's going to be kind of a geeky episode today? Because I want to learn about all the detectors and all the gadgets and all the devices that can detect leaks. So, and I have a bunch of them that we're going to go through. So I'm really excited to see that happen for today. If anyone has questions or comments, I love them. Please send them to me. I realize I got to open up my question feature here. I love them. Ask whatever you want to ask. Should be related to leaks a little bit, please. But send it over. I don't use anyone's names, so feel free to ask whatever you want to ask or make any kind of comments. I could make a mistake, so don't say anything too top secret, but I really do love those questions, and I love those comments. I have a new CEU procedure. So what's going to happen is I'm going to prompt you 3 times. This is the first time, so write down the time right now if you can. You know, if you're off a couple of minutes, it doesn't matter. But write down the time, because then I'm going to send you a link for a form, and all you need to do is put your first name in and your last name and these 3 times. So you're going to be prompted 2 more times during the session. And this is whether you're watching live or you're watching the recorded webinar. It works the same. So once again, jot down this time. This is your first prompt, and you're going to get a second and you're going to get a third. Andy, I hope I remember, because I'm afraid I'm really going to forget about the time prompts, but we'll see what happens. First time prompt, that's what it should look like. So it should be absolutely easy to see. All right, with that being said, let me have our panel introduce themselves with who I see first, and that's Andy.
Buddy, Andy Sitnick. I'm the Vice President of our high-rise operations in South Jersey and Pennsylvania for First Service Residential, and I've been with the company for about 15 years. And we oversee about 50 high rises in my territory.
And Andy, you know a lot about leaks.
Yeah, I used to be a manager myself. The biggest leak I had to deal with was about 85 units destroyed, from sprinklers all the way down to the pinhole leak we can't find, and we had to Swiss cheese the entire building for 3 days before we found it. So yes, I do have, unfortunately, a lot of experience with that.
That's a lot of water. All right. Dave.
Hi, good morning. Dave Chesky. I'm the Executive Vice President, handling the Civil Engineering Group for Reserve Studies and Transitions for Falcon Engineering. We're a full service engineering, architecture, energy consulting firm, servicing community associations up and down the East Coast and nationally now.
All right, and James.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Tronosky, also with the Falcon Group. I've been with Falcon for 14 years this month. I am an Executive Vice President with our MEP Energy Services Division out of Warren, New Jersey, and we serve clients, as Dave mentioned, up and down the East Coast and nationally out west.
All right, thanks for being here. So I really want to spend a lot of time talking about the detectors. We went over this before we went live, but there is some kind of stuff I want to get out of the way. In regard to preventing water damage before it starts. Andy, is that important?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you could prevent anything before it starts, you're the most proactive person in this industry. And man, they should be just throwing gobs of money at you to manage your property and or do every bit of management of your building. Unfortunately, you know, we need to find tools to do this. And these leak detection devices typically catch it as early as possible, because the only tried and true way to really prevent is visual inspections by experts. And even then, you could walk by, you turn around and it starts a pinhole leak, depending on, you know, circumstances. So that's a kind of a loaded question, Ray, I have to say.
I like my questions when they're loaded. All right. So, and panel, I'm going to kind of bounce around, so feel free to backtrack if you wanted to comment on something. Why water damage escalates quickly? Dave Chesky, this is how I thought of this topic. In my building, I got up in the morning, I went to go to the trash room or whatever, and guess what? There was a huge leak going on in there. And my thought was this could have been going on all night. Who knew? This is pretty early in the morning. Why isn't there a detector here? And that's what brought me to this point. And I'm curious to see how this turns out today because I really am curious why we don't have more detectors. But is there any other ways to detect water issues, Dave, besides detectors? I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to talk about it a little bit.
I mean, I think, preventative maintenance and regular inspection, checking on the systems in a building, and then those other areas that cause leaks, like the building envelope, and being proactive in maintaining those components will prevent leaks. And if you're not proactive in the preventative maintenance, then eventually it's going to leak, and it could escalate very quickly.
So Dave, do you think it's a fair statement? If we wanted to, we could probably spend an hour just talking about all the different ways that you could prevent leaks in advance, theoretically. Okay.
Hour.
Well, you would love to. You're an engineer. You would love to talk about it for hours, but I don't know if Andy and I want to stay for hours. But where do leaks? So James, let's just touch upon this too. Give me some common places that leaks start related to our industry. Maybe not so common. Maybe throw us a couple surprises.
Sure. So like to Dave's point, I think one of the important things to understand and how you can anticipate where a leak might come from is knowing and having some baseline understanding of the types of systems in the building, because those types of systems are going to kind of present leaks in different ways. So you could have leaks from HVAC risers. You could have leaks from condensate risers backing up. You can have sanitary leaks because of damaged piping or backups in the street that kind of get pushed back into the building. We're dealing with that in a lot of places right now with some of this crazy weather we've been having on the East Coast. We could be looking at building envelope issues that could be causing leaks, condensation forming on the exterior of cold piping. So you may have like a horizontal run of piping in somebody's ceiling, and the insulation's not good, and the pipe sweats and it kind of rains down onto the ceiling. So there's a lot of different ways. Appliances, different types of plumbing fixtures, can all present leaks in different ways.
So Andy, putting you on the spot off the top of your head really quick, my building, I don't want to mention the name of it, not that it's a big deal, but why bother? It's like a 40-year-old building. There's two buildings. They're like 34 stories each. Just go through some of let's see how fast you could do it. Just go through all the things that you're familiar have leaked here. And it's nothing against the building. This would be relatively normal for a 40-year-old building.
The most common at the age of your building is just older pipes. I mean, the original infrastructure is still there, and they've been worked on. You can think some of those apartments have been renovated probably 6 times over. So someone moved the pipe, sweated a pipe, new joints here, new joints there. Maybe they put a bad solder joint in. Maybe they did or didn't put in a shutoff valve, which adds another point or a break in the pipe. The sanitary lines, as Jim mentioned, they break down over time as people clog them with all kinds of stuff, and then to clear them out, you're physically jamming through, which can damage the inside of these pipes. But then you got sprinkler pipes in a large high rise like yours that either freeze or break from physical damage. We've had big mains freeze on the roof. We had one in the porte-cochere recently, so weather does impact those as well. And then you have also a closed loop heating system for heat pumps. So there's water circulating through the building at all times. So you got the triple whammy of leaks that can happen in your building.
Yeah, and Andrew, this is kind of an interesting one. Like with the sprinkler systems, what we've seen in a lot of places is the water can get contaminated. You can have microbes growing in those pipes that can actually eat through the steel, and then you start having all kinds of crazy leaks all over the place. So that's another interesting one, I think, that kind of catches people off guard.
I think it's safe to bet.
In that regard, sorry, Ray, just to throw another example. In the transition world, in new development, there was a material in fire suppression system piping that is known to be defective that a lot of developers used, where the material and the water or antifreeze, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was some sort of chemical reaction that ate away at the pipe and caused leaks.
There's a lot of different material incompatibilities with different spray-on antimicrobial agents, cutting oil for the piping, fire stopping with the CPVC piping. So there's a lot of different things that can go wrong during the original construction.
I would say there's a good chance right now something is leaking here. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
At this very moment, we're just not aware of it. It would be cool if it happened like right behind me. Well, I guess not. I guess that wouldn't be cool. Oh, somebody sent me a message. You know what? Use your question feature if you need CEUs and just put CEUs. I do need to know if you need it or not, so I can send you the link. So everyone has the question feature. Just type CEU in there, and then that way I'll know that you need the CEUs, and I'll make sure I send you the link. So sorry about that, and thanks to the person that sent that over. Okay, here we go.
Do they count for me?
Yeah, it does count for you, but I always forget about the panelists. You guys,
I got my letters.
I know. I always forget to put you guys down. Okay, here we go. So, local water and moisture sensors. James, I don't know what it is. Well, let's do this. Let's go to Andy first, see if he's familiar with it. Andy, any clue what this is about?
Yeah, these are devices that you put in a location that will detect water if it leaks, and there are as archaic as noisemakers to as technologically advanced as tied to your Wi-Fi system and give you all these alerts with various interfaces. And they also we'll talk about the unit. Most of the time they can be put in units, but then larger buildings with infrastructure, big boiler rooms have been putting in more comprehensive systems, or BAS they call it. So yeah, these are they're good to a certain extent, but again, it's just another thing you got to monitor. But they're an effective tool for any chief engineer to react instead, in a couple minutes versus an hour, which could be the difference between 1 to 1,000 gallons.
Andy, you do know everything about everything. Save room for James. He's going to give us the technical explanations.
Got it.
All right. I think Andy's going to probably know every one of these items in some way today, but we'll see. We'll see, because Andy knows a tremendous amount. All right, James. Local water and moisture sensors. Brief description. What is it? Who does it make sense for? Is it expensive? And what do you like about it and not like about it?
I think Andy gave a great description of what it is. I mean, sometimes you hear people refer to them as like a water bug. So it's just a small little audible noisemaker is kind of a perfect descriptor that'll sit in a drain pan, maybe a hot water heater pan, any kind of HVAC secondary, drain pan. And once it detects water, it's going to send off an audible alarm. So that there's, something, going on, and you can go check on it. And it can be very simple as what I've just described, or you can get more elaborate with, kind of interconnected Wi-Fi units that'll talk back to a building automation system or your own home Wi-Fi system, and maybe send you an alert that like, hey, there's an alarm that went over. So I think they make sense in a lot of cases for a lot of different building types and homeowners, even for, a townhouse or something where you have a lot of times we'll see resolutions getting passed where you have to replace your hot water heater after so many years because those things have a tendency to leak, after 8 or 10 years. So in those kind of applications, I think they're great. So it lets the homeowner know right away, hopefully if they're home, for the simple ones, and if they have the, kind of email alert or something set up on a more sophisticated one, that there's an issue. And then in a bigger building, where you have more kind of, systems that are, kind of shared common elements that serve multiple units, you can get into some more sophisticated devices that'll, kind of help the, chief engineer, the property manager, and any other staff, kind of get a heads up on, something where there's a problem.
All right. So Dave, I'm going to bounce around, but I know you specialize in certain aspects of the engineering. So I know you may not be totally aware as much as James, so don't feel free to bounce it around. But I remember I had one of these devices in my single family home upstairs. I had an air conditioning unit upstairs and downstairs. And it was a simple audio. And I think it was inexpensive and cheap. Am I remembering it right? It wasn't expensive. Is that correct? The audio version?
They're not expensive. I actually have one in my basement that's tied to my alarm system that you can get, as part of your alarm system, and they're tied to the Wi-Fi and they're audible. It's simple and easy.
So like, why? We're not just talking about high rises today, but I'm going to refer to high rises because that's where I live. Like, why wouldn't we have one of them like in the trash room, right? Where all the pipes are. Like, I don't understand. Like, that could have saved so much damage, right? Because that water could have been like, why aren't we using these more then, Dave? And I'll go to Andy too on this. Because if they're inexpensive, why not just have them? Because of an audio, somebody would have heard it.
Yeah, I understand that. At scale though, if you think about, could you buy the $20 water bug and put them on what, 50 trash rooms? Sure. It. I don't know if that is. You also, just the simple noisemakers. It's kind of like, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? If nobody's awake at 2 a.m. and it's not that, and it's all the way in the end of the hallway, like, who's going to know? If it's during the day when the maintenance team is there, possibly you get a phone call or someone's walking through. So ideally, in order for it to be very effective, you want some type of connectivity. And then the cost gets up there. And there's an ongoing cost because, everyone wants revenue per month. So whatever service you subscribe to, you got to get the subscription to make sure it's connecting and talking. And then you got to make sure you have Wi-Fi on every floor so that it connects to a central place. So, it sounds, it sounds good to just have a noisemaker, but they're not as foolproof. In your single family home, it's probably the better option. Yes.
Yeah. I think they're more practical for single family setups, townhome setups, but in the high rise, that's a little bit more difficult.
I think from just a long-term usability standpoint, I'm sure everyone's buildings are very well mannered, but these things, these are not expensive devices, so I don't think they'll last, in a kind of a public area. And then you get nuisance alarms where someone's taking out the trash and they spill something and it sets it off. So I think it's a little more probably complex. You'd want a more robust system, that kind of protected against those things if you were going to try to do something like that.
All right. Water sensing cable and rope systems. Andy, do you know what it is?
Yes.
And then I'll go. Okay. Do you see a lot of it?
I see it on more newer modern buildings, especially when the plumbing equipment's not in the basement, because
Okay.
you'll get, if you get groundwater, that system's going to be going off. You want it in an elevated area, but the newer buildings are typically coming with that.
Dave Chesky, what is it?
I've got no experience with water sensing cable and rope systems.
Okay. James, I know this is your area. Have you heard of it, James? Maybe you haven't.
Yeah, no, it's a set of cables that'll be wrapped around the pipe and then insulated, typically. And then when there's a leak, and that could be tied into a BAS, it could be tied into a local alarm. You're going to have a change in resistance, where it detects water at that location, and that's going to set off the alarm. So I think I've seen it maybe once or twice in some, higher end new construction, but not really in most of the existing buildings that we're going through. And I think, depending on where we, land with some of the other conversations, to install that, would be difficult, to kind of as a retrofit. But I think it's definitely, if you had it, it's a great tool to kind of pinpoint where you might have a leak in a very large system.
And then to fill people in that are watching, like, the panelists don't know what I'm going to bring up, and a lot of the stuff I get off the internet, so it may not make sense. So I may be throwing terminology at them that has no basis in reality because it's off the internet, and I like to do it that way because a lot of people depend on the internet. Andy, these sensing cables, right? They're mechanical rooms. They wrap around pipes and things like that. What do you think of them? Obviously, you have some experience with them. You like them? You don't like them? They're expensive. Are they not expensive?
Not only do they wrap around pipes, but there are systems that you run around on the floor. So imagine a row of boilers and you run this cable on the floor around it. So if there's a drip and outward towards the drain, that rope detects it as well. So they're good. You can even attach them to automatic valves. When the BAS or the building automation systems will usually detect that, a chief engineer could, shut the valve, or you can have it set to automatic. Look, as long as you have someone monitoring, it's like a camera system. Cameras are useless unless you have someone actively monitoring them, like a security officer. So if you have a chief engineer that can actually sit there, and not sit there, but is connected to it at all times or during the day, they're more likely to be able to react as quick as possible. And I can tell you, we manage a building at Liberty Place in Philadelphia. If you saw the infrastructure of that building, there is literally a command center like NORAD that is nothing but building automation, and many of them are leak sensors.
Why wouldn't any association, why wouldn't this be a priority almost like a fire, right? Why is water more of a, I guess because it's not a safety issue, but like this seems a major priority to me, Andy, right? Why wouldn't there be an alert system in where it goes? I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. If there's a leak, I don't care if the manager, that would be something I think the manager should get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. How come boards aren't setting that up then?
It's the cost, you know, and a lot of times it has to, you know, there's not to get the legalese, but you know, most of these need to be put into the units because oftentimes it's the unit that leaks under the garbage disposal, the water heater, something inside the unit. That's a unit component. It's typically the unit owner's got to pay for that. So you're kind of splitting the lines of who's responsible. So, you know, good luck telling everybody, hey, we need $2,000 to install water sensors. And someone says, I don't want to do that. You don't need it. Just call me in the middle of the night. I'll shut it off. You know, that's really what you get.
That's why I like to ask you, Andy, because I don't really know. I'm just really just an owner at the end of the day. And there's all reasons those things happen. Really quick question, James. This could be a good revenue generator for Falcon if Dave Chesky was available at night, like as a side business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's just sleeping anyway. People could just call Dave. It could go to Dave Chesky at home, and then Dave could do whatever from there. So just keep that in mind.
He'll call me. So.
Okay. All right. Whole building water flow monitors. Andy, do you know what this is?
I do. Yes.
Okay. All right. James, what is it?
I'm assuming you're talking about like a flow switch on like a or sensor on the incoming water service or fire service. So that's on the fire service. It's important, you know, for not only leak detection but for, you know, tamper and fire alarming. So when there's a detection of flow of water, it's going to send a signal to the fire alarm to say, hey, something's going on, you know, and that's going to alert everyone in the building or at least, you know, the fire command center. And then on the building service side, it's going to be more related to the measurement of flow, you know, for domestic water coming into the building.
I have descriptions on all these if we need them. So systems that monitor water usage and identify continuous and unusual flow.
Yeah.
So I guess the way this works is all of a sudden the water's flying through the pipe then, James, and it sends an alert and says, look, this isn't normal, right?
Yeah.
This water's got to be going somewhere. Okay.
So there's all kinds of like metering options for different components, and that's really where you're going to be able to zero in on where there might be a problem. So like a cooling tower, for example, you're expecting to use a certain amount of water because just the process of evaporative cooling. If you're getting too much flow there, then there's probably a leak or something else wrong with the system, with the condenser water system. And it sounds like you have heat pumps in your building. So like that would be something they would be monitoring, you know, there for the water consumption. Same with any other, you know, kind of plumbing appliance. Just, you know, when it's going to flow, when you're intentionally using it and how much that flow is supposed to be. When you start getting something outside of those parameters, then you're going to, you know, be looking to detect it and kind of alert you that something's wrong.
Okay. Is that one, Andy, is that expensive or not expensive, these things? Are they common? Do you see a lot of them?
They're not that expensive just because it's usually not very, it's like 1 or 2 devices, if you will. It's usually typically tied to a BAS or building automation system. We're seeing it more on steam systems, where buildings that have steam heat or boiling steam and making steam for heat. Because in theory, if you boil water and steam and put it through pipes, you should keep all the steam, in theory, if it's sealed properly. But obviously you lose steam, and to create more steam, you need water. So if that system is, if all of a sudden your water goes off the charts, you may have steam leaks you don't know about because you're constantly refilling and boiling more water to make more steam. At the same time, buildings that have, or say it's a community that has heavy irrigation, you typically know based on weather patterns nowadays, and this is almost science at this point, how much water you're going to use. If all of a sudden you've got spikes and it's been wet and the system wasn't running, you may have some underground leaks, and then, you know, that could lead to sinkholes and other messes. But those flow meters definitely can help detect anomalies. And with AI today, I'm surprised we don't have some robots doing all this stuff, but I'm sure it's to come for a nominal monthly fee.
Yeah, and I think on the equipment side, I think the boiler was a great example, the steam boiler, and that's really the case with any major piece of HVAC equipment that's circulating water through the building or part of that process. These are like very expensive assets for any community, and if you're leaking water somewhere, you're also leaking the chemicals that are in that closed loop hydronic system that are protecting that equipment. So you don't want to have some kind of unrestrained, even if it's not causing any damage, leak that's going somewhere where you're using a ton of makeup water into that system, because it's going to lead to corrosion problems in those systems, the piping and the chillers, the boilers, all that stuff. So very important.
Did you guys see Dave get all excited when we started talking about sinkholes? He did. He got all excited because that's right up your alley, right? Dave, that's right up your alley, right?
It is.
That's water. He got all excited. I saw it. I saw his eyes light up. All right, we're gonna get to that, Dave. Don't worry. Let's watch our time here, guys, because we got a lot of these to go through. Okay. Somebody asked, because they said I didn't mention it, the water sensing cable and rope systems, are they expensive or not expensive?
I honestly haven't ever priced one out to be installed. I've had the pleasure of new construction just coming with the building, and I never asked the developer.
Okay. Yeah. I think from a cost standpoint, to like buy that material, whatever the components of that are, probably very small in comparison to like retrofitting that on an existing building, because you have to get access to all that pipe that you want to monitor. And I think the benefit of having a system like that is to be able to identify a leak location. So you have a 10-story building, you're opening up walls on all those risers to get access to that pipe, and that's really going to be cost prohibitive.
All right, so you got to put it in when you build the building. All right, automatic water shutoff valves. This is obvious. There's an unusual flow. It ends up turning off the water. James, like brief description, is that basically describes how it works?
Yeah, so you can have that on both like HVAC or domestic water systems, and you can use a system like the cables we were talking about, or pressure differentials to kind of detect when something happened, and it'll close the valve on that line to prevent leak damage.
Andy, you see a lot of it, you don't see a lot of it. Is it expensive? Is it not expensive? And now people are asking me if you like it or not. So what do you think?
I love it on water heaters, especially buildings that have water tanks, because those are bombs, and especially they're liabilities. So yeah, they're good, because I would rather leak 50 gallons of water than 500 gallons of water. And if it detects the leak and it only drains the existing hot water tank, we're good. Interesting enough that we never really detect leaks. We usually get calls, excuse me, my water's not working. And then the maintenance tech finds out, yeah, the automatic shut off the water because there was a leak detection. So I love them in units, not necessarily on larger equipment, just because shutting on the water on a closed loop heating system or the domestic water in the whole building is an anomaly, or it can create more problems, and usually has to be done right and in sequence with a team. So I would prefer that my guys get eye on something and say, all right, we got to shut the water down, and then we get communicate things out.
Yeah. We had a building.
Expensive or not expensive? I'll go to you second, James.
Yeah,
expensive or not expensive?
Individually, no. I think a plumber could do it for $400 to $500 if you call. Okay. Like if I wanted to get my water heater in my house, $400 or $500 installed, even to an app. The larger stuff is going to be more tied into a building automation, and usually typically you do that with your HVAC provider.
Yeah, we had a building that we still work in that had an existing system that had been installed 20 years or so ago. They had a brownout, and all those valves closed at the same time while the pump was going on, and the inertia of that water caused a lot of damage to the mechanical systems in the boiler room when that closed. So that was a great point about just making sure it's all sequenced correctly, and you really want to have trusted HVAC and control people like doing that work.
So this one's use an area of caution on it. Dave Chesky, water sub-meters. Explain how sub-meters can identify unusual usage. I think we just kind of went over that, didn't we, Dave Chesky? Isn't that the same thing?
No, I think it's a little bit different. But again, I'm gonna defer this to Jim, because this is his area of expertise.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things, with this. I think we did talk about it a little bit. So you have a common water service, you can sub-meter it out and, bill people individually. But then for leak detection, you're really looking for, like, on those mechanical systems, to see, and landscaping, irrigation systems, and things like that to kind of monitor flow. So you know what it's supposed to be and what's expected. And if you're keeping an eye on it, if it deviates from that significantly, then you have a leak somewhere. And then you kind of have to kind of probe and try to find it.
Water pressure monitors and data loggers, high pressure sun and pressure loss. It sounds like the same thing too, right, James? Very similar, or no?
Yeah, so you're going to have different measuring devices all around, these types of systems that'll tell you what the pressures are. And, differential pressure is one of the ways we can, kind of detect leak and trigger some of these, protection measures. So, these are, these can all be tied back to a building automation system for central monitoring, and then data loggers either through that building automation system or through, I don't think I have one here. I actually do. So this is a temperature data logger. So a device like this where it's recording every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, whatever you have it set for, what those pressures are. And that can be a useful tool to help diagnose problems, in systems and maybe deviations in how a system's operating with respect to pressure.
Expensive or not expensive? Andy, are you familiar with them? Are they expensive or not expensive?
Well, they're not expensive because typically they're gauges. When you've got to start adding them to like audit, or when you have to start connecting them to the internet, they get a little more expensive with sensors. But they're key because think about this: if you're like your building is 30 stories, how do you get water to the roof? Well, you need pressure. And if you're at the bottom of the building, you're going to have to experience a lot more pressure. And what we do is we reduce that pressure so your shower isn't knocking you down like an elephant. And those pressure reducing valves can explode, and if you have too much pressure in smaller pipes, you can create leaks. So knowing the data, if you're experiencing pressure anomalies, and maybe our reducing valves aren't working well, and that's something a good maintenance plan in a building has, and they're checking that stuff regularly because they're mechanical and those valves can go bad.
It's so complicated, Dave Chesky, around here. It really is how things operate. Okay, I'm going to get into some really cool sensors, and I think they're really cool. So I want to definitely learn about them. But before I do, if you are here for CEUs, jot down the time. Maybe jot down what Dave Chesky's wearing. Maybe, no, we're not going to ask you that. Just jot down the time, and because you're going to need it for the form. That's all. So I'm going to leave it up there for a second or so. While you're doing that, I do want to take a quick break because I know the beginning was going to be all the high-rise stuff, and Dave Chesky specializes in the sites. That's where he's like a super expert. Right, Dave Chesky? Did I say that accurately?
The super expert part I don't know about, but.
Okay. So I have a special question for Dave Chesky. I don't know if you know this, James. People always used to like this. The Dave Chesky special question break. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dave, think carefully. You must travel from New York City to California, and you could only ride one giant insect. Would you choose an ant, a rhinoceros beetle, or a monarch butterfly? Let's see how much you know. Let's see if you're on your game today, because you usually know everything about everything. What is your answer?
Where did you come up with this stuff, Ray?
There's a real answer to this. I researched it for you.
All right. Well, I'm definitely choosing the butterfly.
Andy, what do you think? Do you agree with Dave Chesky or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I would take the butterfly just because why would no one's gonna just mess with me on the butterfly? You see me on an ant or a beetle, they might want to crush it or like ew and call the National Guard.
Remember, it's giant. It's giant.
I know. That's why I said call the National Guard.
Yeah.
James, do you want to go against the trend?
Yeah, I'm a natural contrarian, so I would choose the ant.
I'm sorry, Dave Chesky, but you're wrong.
Wow.
The monarch, if I could make a statement like that in such a ridiculous way, a monarch butterfly could travel thousands of miles, but it carries no extra weight, Dave. It can't carry people.
But it's giant.
Ants, doesn't matter. Ants, I'm ruling that your answer was wrong. Ants are excellent load carriers, but they are relatively slow. You want the rhinoceros beetle because they can combine strength with steady walking ability. And they can walk while carrying 30 times their own weight, Dave Chesky. So I'm very sorry, Dave, but this one is going to be down as you did not know everything. But okay. You could argue it. Send me some papers that you find. I'm sure you'll send me some geeky engineering form now that'll explain
not on
weight
this. Absolutely
to
not.
flight flushing. Okay, now let's get into the really cool devices. Acoustical, I just like the sound of it, Andy. Acoustical leak detection equipment. Now I'm going to wonder if Andy knows about some of these. He may not. Andy, have you ever heard of this?
No, it actually sounds very impractical in a busy high rise with people living in it, playing music and all that stuff. So go ahead.
James, do you need me to read the little description I have of it, or can you run with it?
No, I'm familiar with it. We don't. My realm is mostly in the high rise as well, so we don't use it a lot. We've used it before in some mechanical rooms to try to like identify flow issues in systems. But it's basically a stethoscope, that they use to like listen to how the system is operating. I think it's more for like site work, right, where you're trying to find an underground leak. So Dave probably is most familiar with it.
This is definitely something, a leak detection method that's used in more low-rise construction, townhomes, condos, single-family homes, where you're trying to determine if there is a domestic supply, water supply leak, either inside or outside. And it's basically listening for the hissing created from water escaping the pipe. So they'll put a listening device on like the water meter or a part of the exposed pipe and listen for any kind of hissing sound, and be able to pinpoint where the leak is based on that acoustic. So like the loudest hissing that they'll be able to determine is where likely that leak is occurring.
It sounds really cool. I like it. Is it expensive or not expensive, Dave?
There's companies that specialize in it, and they typically will work on a like half day or day rate. Usually runs between like $1,500 to $2,000 a day for them to investigate. We actually just investigated one and found a leak outside of a townhome unit where they thought it was a drainage issue. It was causing soil washout underneath the patio. They kept thinking that it was a drainage issue, or they even said that there's a spring underground under the building. And no other area it was a building of 6 units, side by side townhomes. The units adjacent to the unit that was having the water issue were completely dry. So we had the company come out. They put their listening devices on the meters, on the hydrants, and they found a leak in front of the building, probably about 70 to 90 feet away from where the water was showing up. So it'll travel quite a bit based on ground features, soil, rock, so on and so forth. And it'll surface in somewhere where the leak is not even near.
So this isn't so this isn't a detector that's out there all the time. This is a detection device where you hire someone and they find a leak. This isn't something
Yes.
that would be a monitor. Okay, because I need to make sure I specify that, because I don't know
Correct.
whether these are monitors or not. So this one is not a monitor. This is a device that you use to find a leak and you call someone out there. Okay.
Yeah, it's a detection method.
Yeah, can you listen in on people with it too, or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a stethoscope, so you can, put it on a door or wall and listen to conversations if you want.
Have you ever done that?
I have not.
Okay, just curious. All right. Infrared, and thermal imaging cameras. I guess, Andy, James is going to tell me too. This one is not something that monitors. This is a device you use to find leaks. Do you think that's what James is going to tell me?
Yeah, and I recommend to every one of our maintenance crews to get one. They're not expensive. To just walk around and you can. FLIR, FLIR is the typical forward-looking infrared is what you want to look for.
Yeah, they even have an attachment that can hook up to your iPhone, that you can turn your iPhone into a thermal imaging camera. So it's really cool that this is like accessible consumer technology, and they run the gamut from pretty moderately priced. I think the iPhone ones probably cost about $300 to get that attachment, and then the ones that like energy, like conservation, like pros, like balancing companies and stuff, get as we're energy conservation pros, but they go up to like $25,000 for like really high end like cameras. So we have some of them at the office, and we use them for all sorts of stuff on the HVAC side, but they're also very helpful on the leak side with building envelope. You can see the difference in temperature between the parts of the construction that are wet and the parts that are not. And then for plumbing and HVAC, if it's like a hot water leak or something, or a steam leak, it'll really pop against the background of like a colder temperature day. So you can help locate risers and where leaks are and in the ground if there's a steam leak or something like that. It's a really useful tool.
We're also using them for just general temperature anomalies in like electrical systems, as well as like missing insulation on exterior walls. Because depending on the temperature between outside and inside, you can tell where there might be missing insulation involved. So it's not just leak detection. There's other construction defects that these cameras will identify.
Could Dave use it to see through? Could Dave use it to see through walls? Like if he wanted to spy on someone, James, can you use it to see through walls to see if people are in there, like the expensive one?
They're close enough. They're close enough to the wall. You could probably pick up their heat signature. Yeah.
Interesting. Have you ever done that, Dave? No. Okay. What were you saying, Andy?
Yeah, these are very big on with roof leaks. So if you have an old flat roof, I mean, you sometimes it feels like a water bed. Clearly, there's water there. But after the sun goes down, you run one of these cameras, and you'll see exactly where the water's sitting.
Okay, let's get back to the detectors, not monitor ones. Moisture meters. Do you know what this is, Andy? Is this a monitor or a detector? Do you know what it is?
It's a detector tool. It's typically used in the restoration world.
Okay.
They poke it into the sheetrock. It measures how wet it is, or carpet, things like that.
Can we fly through that then? Is that okay? Because I want to stick with things that actually detect leaks and let people know about it. Did anybody want to add anything to that? Okay. Humidity and temperature monitors. James, is this going to be a detection tool or a monitor tool?
It could be both. So we use them. Actually, last week we were Energy Star certifying some buildings, so that was one of the tools we had to use to just get a sense of the indoor air quality. But then I have one here that's just a simple one you can get on Amazon, and that'll give you like a temperature and humidity reading in a space, and kind of, this is a very simple one. This stuff is all integrated into building automation systems. So we're going to have both of those kind of sensors all over the place, on a sophisticated building automation system. And if there's a place where you have a lot of leaks or something, the humidity level, could be elevated. So you may be able to use it to find, where a space where there may be a steam leak or, some other water leak that's evaporating into the air. So it could be used for detection and monitoring.
Dave, I'm going to ask Andy this though. It seems like there's enough technology out there nowadays. There's really no reason not to detect a leak. I know we'll talk about it a little bit, but it's amazing like how much stuff is out there. But I guess Andy's going to tell us that it's a money budgeting monitoring issue. What do you think, Dave? You agree?
Yeah, I think it is always comes down to that. I mean, buildings are focused on maintaining and upgrading their existing systems. And also a lot of the buildings that we deal with are older buildings. They're not really set up for the systems that new buildings have that might include the newer technologies and monitoring capabilities. Retrofit something older is always going to be much more of a hassle and more expensive. And those buildings are always focusing on, restoring concrete and replacing roofs and the really important stuff. So
there's only like so much, Andy, that boards can deal with, right? And then
it's not an information or technology problem. It's a budgetary and will problem. Like, do we have the will to, install this thing or get this thing done?
I'm going to do a follow-up with the insurance people to see if it's worth I don't want to talk about it right now because we'll run out of time, but if it's worth an association to even get involved in this, what's the benefit for that besides a lot of aggravation for the residents? Do you know what I mean, Andy? Maybe we'll have you come back and we'll get the insurance people on and the lawyers on and we'll talk about the money end of this whole deal.
So if you want, quick comment on that. Anytime your broker's marketing and you tell them, you brag about your awesome leak detection systems, they're sure as hell going to talk to every carrier about it. It might help your rates and your ability to get AAA rated.
Roof leak detection equipment, James. It says it's a monitoring system.
I don't have, and I think this is going to probably fall into the category of like some of these water sensors we were looking at before. I don't think I've run across anything with roof leaks. Maybe Dave or Andy might have some insight on that. That's different.
Let me give you the
Now, this-
description. It says it detects water beneath or within roof assembly. So, Dave Chesky, it sounds like we already kind of probably covered it.
Well, we
Not on
typically
any of
have
the-
those systems, and they're called the penthouse owners
Right.
because they'll tell us right away there's a roof leak.
HVAC.
Yeah, I've not seen any of those installed in any building that I've ever come across in the community association world.
Okay, so James, this is about like it says pumps and float switches, pan sensors, pump alarms. We already talked about this, correct?
Yeah, just
We
one
covered it.
like additional thing with that is those like water bugs, and you can get them where they're tied back to the HVAC unit. So if you have a primary and a secondary pan, there's an overflow. You have that sensor in the secondary pan. It could send a signal to shut down the HVAC unit, so you stop making condensate, and that'll help control the damage from the leak. And then you'll know that, hey, it's getting warm in here. My unit shut off. Maybe investigate the problem.
Andy, this is a big one. Fire sprinkler monitoring equipment. So these are monitors. So I know you're going to be familiar with it. Why don't you just get it going so James can offer the technical aspects?
Well, more and more modern fire suppression systems are coming with some tied-in technology to check on the flows, the pressures, etc. But I think Jim mentioned earlier, like flow switches are the big thing that actually, sometimes they send false positives, but the alarm goes off. It doesn't know the sprinkler head broke. The only way it knows the sprinkler head broke and is actually pumping water is that it detected water flowing through that sensor. And that's tied to the fire alarm. And the fire alarm then says, flow detector switch, 14th floor, back closet or something. Like it'll usually call that out. But it's kind of more, I'd say the modern systems have the new technology. Old systems have the antiquated technology, but your modern fire alarms are better to address it with what they call addressable systems. So you know exactly where the problem is instead of the alarm going off in your giant high rise and you scrambling to find where the water is.
So James, this isn't any different than the other items we spoke about. I thought maybe it was something special.
Yeah, it's really, and it's since it's a life safety system, like everything is kind of designed with that in mind. So those flow switches and everything, and the addressable system are all great to kind of help pinpoint that, and you can certainly use it to if there was an accidental sprinkler head activation or a pipe froze and broke, or you had a compressor fail or something like that. But everything is kind of pushed towards the life safety aspects. So the flow switches, the tamper switches, all that stuff to kind of make sure the system is well maintained and operating.
Freeze and low temperature sensors. Okay. Andy, do you ever? I think they're pretty obvious what they are, and then James will jump on it. But Andy, do you see these? Do you know what they are?
No, I don't typically see these. I mean, it's pretty much a thermostat of some kind, or a thermometer. Actually, yeah, I've never seen it in place where someone's like, oh, it might be cold up on the roof. We typically know when it's 0 degrees out, we should be watching our.
So James, this is one that just kind of popped up here on my research. Is it mean anything? Is it not realistic or not tied in? Or
no, I think it does. One of the things where you're most going to see this is internal to your HVAC equipment. So if you have a system that's not functioning correctly and the airstream is lower temperature than maybe you have a hot water coil or a chilled water coil, you're bringing in freezing air, it could freeze that coil, and then you'll have a leak, when it thaws out, and expensive damage. So that's mostly, it's a protection device on the HVAC equipment to protect it from, having a freeze up.
The other place where I've experienced this, I've lived up in Vermont for a bit and was working in townhome communities up there where they were very susceptible to, prolonged freezing temperatures, unoccupied residences that if their heating systems went out would cause freeze-ups of plumbing and leaks as a result. So we would have sensors installed in certain locations where the plumbing was susceptible to freezing, and that would be centrally monitored by an alarm system. Back then, Now, a lot of smart thermostats you can program to have to trigger alarms if the temperature drops below a certain set point, so that you could, fix the heating system so that your plumbing doesn't freeze.
Dave, on these, if a lot of these freeze ups happen all the time in the same spots, it seems, right? Like every few years or something. So why wouldn't a board put this one in? If it's froze once, there's a good chance it could freeze over again, right? Or is that not the case?
Yeah, I mean, we see, if they're the same spot is freezing and it's the same plumbing pipe or whatever is freezing over and over again, and they're having leaks over and over again, that condition that's causing the freezing needs to be addressed. It's not necessarily the sensor that needs to be installed. It's take away the aspect of it getting to the point of freezing and leaking. So you have to eliminate the infiltration of air that's causing the freezing and then the leak, or the cause of the leak, so that it doesn't happen. That's really what's mostly what gets addressed.
One quick, I do remember seeing these elevator systems. That's the only spot I've ever seen, because to Dave's point, wondering why the elevator got hot, or the elevator machinery got hot or cold, is it's not a sensor problem. It's, you got to fix the envelope of the building, and or put a mini split heat pump in there with an air conditioner.
That's another interesting thing, Andy. I don't want time about it now, but I didn't even think about that with elevators keeping the equipment cooler hot. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of machinery and a lot of computers up there.
Dave, Andy, I want our building to have all these sensors. I want the board to get all the sensors. I want every sensor. So, Dave, these freeze devices, they're probably cheap too, right? They're probably not expensive, right?
Like I said, I mean, a lot of the smart thermostats these days have alarm trigger points that you could set, and they'll notify your phone, or they could be tied into your home alarm system, or again, this is more related to low-rise townhome condo. So buildings that are being monitored by the property management company through some sort of management system, I'm sure that there's a way to monitor that.
James, pipe heat trace monitoring. Is this a detection system or a monitoring system?
It can be a monitoring system, and then it's a protection system. So you have the heat trace, and cost wise, you could probably buy like a 15-foot section of heat trace from Home Depot, and just wrap a small section of piping, and that's not going to have very sophisticated controls. Or you can get a more elaborate heat trace system that has those alarms, kind of built in, that's monitoring whether or not it's functioning or not. And then that could be also tied back to like a building automation system. I think kind of tied in with the freeze protection like sensors, there's another area. If you go into a garage and you see like a drop ceiling, more often than not, above that ceiling is going to be a bunch of miles of sprinkler piping and probably sanitary piping and domestic water piping. And you're probably going to have like electric unit heaters, space heaters up in that ceiling that are set to protect the freeze. That's in lieu of like heat tracing everything. So there should be thermostats or temperature sensors there as well, to kind of make sure that space temperature is maintained. And if you live on the first floor and they're turned up a little too high, you have a nice heated floor, it's kind of a bonus effect of that. But something that needs to have an eye kept on it.
All right, I'm going to fly through these. Water heater and drain pans, we already talked about it. Washing machine and hose shutoff systems, that's obvious. Dishwasher leak detection systems, a lot of these are for owners. Refrigerator and ice maker leak sensors. Toilet leak detection devices, I don't even know why you need this. If you're like my age, I'm in the bathroom so much, I can't imagine a leak could go on too long in there.
Let me touch on that one.
Okay.
So don't think of leak as damage. Think of leak as your bowl drains and fills, drains and fills, drains and fills. And you're in South Carolina for a week, and that fills every hour 5 times. Think of the gallons and gallons and gallons, and now extrapolate that to maybe 50 units have the same toilet problem. Your water bill just skyrocketed. So there are new devices and monitors that some of the technology companies are coming out with that we can know if your toilet flapper is bad, and maintaining that. And that could be the difference between hundreds of thousands of dollars in water in a year.
How the heck did you know that? How did that even come up? I would have never thought, like, the stuff that you have to know and deal with is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to fly right through there.
A humble brag. I mean, our First Service has an energy division that is partnered with a company that's trying to evaluate a lot of buildings for these toilet monitors. So I just happen to get lucky that there's actually a program that I'm working on with my buildings. How about that?
There you go, audience. The management companies are going to be spying on your toilet usage. They're going to have all your toilet data on top of that. Okay.
Big toilet.
They'll be helping people. Smart building management systems. You guys talked about how everything has to be tied in. You got to have Wi-Fi, or some of this stuff's not going to work. All right. Dave Chesky, you are an expert in a whole other part of this that we didn't talk about, right? So what was the part we missed today?
Well, we touched on a little bit is leak detection in low-rise construction and supply systems to townhome buildings, leak detection of domestic water supply systems to low-rise construction, townhomes, condominiums, and even high-rise buildings, but on the outside of the buildings, supplying the water to the building from the main. So we're talking about the service lines, the fire service lines going into a building. They could potentially leak. These pipes are underground. They're typically, in our part of the country, they're typically at least 4 feet deep. They're, in many cases, old material. In some cases, a lot of buildings were built in the 80s using piping material that was defective. There were class action suits against it. That material is called polybutylene, where it was really easy to install, but the water, the additives that public water utilities add to the water, like fluoride and chlorine to treat the water, actually ate away at the pipe material, the polybutylene material, and caused pinhole leaks. And they would leak for years until that leak would surface. And this is plastic piping, so it's much difficult to identify where the leak is. Acoustic leak detection, like we talked about a little bit earlier, isn't as effective on plastic piping because it doesn't create such a loud hiss like copper piping does, or metal piping. So they would leak for years until you would notice either a really wet spot or some kind of sinkhole that happens, subsidence in the ground, and then those leaks would grow in size and in volume, and there's communities that are replacing pipes site-wide because the material is defective. But it's very common, in older construction, even with copper piping, to deal with leaks and to have to replace pipes, identify where the leaks are, and use these leak detection methods that we touched on a little bit, outside of the building, not just in the building.
You know what I'm thinking, Dave? It seems like James has such a cooler job at Falcon. He's in high rises. He's like doing all these cool devices, and he's going in these fancy high rises, and there's like models around and movie stars. And then you're doing very important work, also critical important work, but you're like outside, like in like a ditch or something, like, and you're afraid to fall in a sinkhole. It seems like James is like living a lifestyle out there in these high rises, and it's really glamorous and probably hanging out with famous people.
Depends. I mean, Jim is mostly like stuck in a boiler room. I'm at least outside.
Oh, okay.
Gotta look at it that way.
That is true.
It gets sold to fresh air.
Yeah. That is true, actually. It's a really good point. Okay, let's do closing thoughts. And Dave, by the way, thanks for being here too, because Dave's always a good sport, Andy. He always comes on these programs. Even if it's not his area of expertise, he's always happy to be here. You know what I mean? Because you deal with other different aspects. So I feel like we don't spend enough time with Dave on stuff that he particularly specializes in. I think Dave has mentioned that. All right, let's do closing thoughts. Let's move quick. Oh, by the way, CEU check. Write down the time because you're going to need it. You should have 3 times. So make sure you write it down, and I'll send you the link for that. All right, let's do closing thoughts. Let's go to Dave first, Dave, closing thoughts on today. Anything we didn't
Sure.
talk about, forgot to mention.
Just real quick, I mean, we didn't really touch on planning, capital planning, reserves, but preventing leaks is also being proactive and making sure your property is maintained and things are replaced in a timely fashion. So, having an accurate capital reserve study reflecting the work that needs to be done is part of this whole process. So
Definitely. I would imagine. I actually have a reserve question, Dave. If you could just stay when we're done, when I say we're done, I'll stop the recording and I'll save it as an add-on. Is that okay with you? Because I have a reserve question about that.
Sure.
James.
I was going to kind of echo the same thing Dave said. I mean, number one, know where your valves are, make sure they work so you can respond to an emergency like as fast as possible. And a lot of buildings, they don't even know where they're located. But number two is knowing those systems, what types of systems you have in the building, and talk to your reserve professional. So when those systems kind of come of age, they can include it in the capital reserve study. A lot of times these piping systems that we're talking about are kind of outside of that reserve window that you're looking at, and they don't make their way into it when in a timely fashion. So you have a building that's 40, 50 years old that has certain types of HVAC systems. You can predict with fairly high accuracy the types of problems that you're going to have, and that should be in the reserve study. So very important to have those kind of discussions with those people when the time comes to your building.
Andy, when I ran across that leak, it really was a bad leak. I was so tempted to turn the knob myself. There was a thing that you could just turn right there in front of me. Then part of me said, Ray, you don't know what you're doing. You're not Andy. You're not qualified to turn this lever. But man, talking about James made me think about that, about the importance of shutoff valves, because I was so tempted. But that would have been a mistake, right? For me to touch that.
Especially if it was red, meaning it was tied to the fire system and not leaking. Like, you would have just caused an alarm, and everyone we'd have to put a message out that Ray sent the building into general alarm, and you'd be the pariah of the building that day.
I know. All right. Well, closing thoughts. I'm glad I didn't do it then.
Yeah, I'll just address your overarching theme of why doesn't everyone have these devices? Well, first identify, do you even have a problem that requires these devices? Likely, if you have a high rise, to a certain extent, they're going to be somewhat valuable. But you got to figure out what that return on investment is and why you want to deal with this. If you have 1 or 2 leaks a month in a high rise, like, all right, you have a high rise. But if you've got 20 to 30 and they're all kind of following a pattern, then seriously sit down, talk to your providers, and figure out what can we do to prevent these, because that's going to help you in the long run on the insurance, the aggravation of dealing with owners who have damaged property, because it's never fun in a high rise to deal with multiple insurance companies and who's paying for what. And but just think about it before you rush in and thinking, because they're not always the best idea for, and you may also rush into a technology that may be underbaked or overbaked for your purpose. So seriously think about why you need these.
All right, excellent. Don't leave, panelists, because I want to ask a quick follow-up question. I want to thank everybody for being here so much. If you want to stay for the follow-up question, you are welcome to. And I'm going to try to do a follow-up also with insurance reps, and I'll try to include that in the link in the description if I have time to do so. But thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate it. All right, here's my quick reserve question. Monitoring equipment in regard to leak issues and detectors and things like that, is that going to be a reserve item?
I mean, if there is a system installed in a building and we could see it and it's functional, then yeah, it's a common component that is of some value. That it depends on its value. There, a reservable component has to pass a 4-part test. One is it a common element? 2, does it have a expected life cycle? Can we see it? Therefore, does it have a determinable remaining life cycle? Something that, we know how much life it's got left based on visual inspection. And the last is, does it meet some sort of budget threshold that the association has set? So things that cost a couple $100, the association might not want to include in reserves because it's just such a small cost that maybe it's paid for through operating funds. So it really depends on the extent of the system.
I'm wondering
if it's a system that is, building wide in a building like yours, that would be, covering 50 refuse rooms and the boiler room, and you've got those cables and all that, and you're talking about thousands of dollars. And yeah, absolutely.
How do you one thing I kind of picked up from the live stream that I didn't think about was all this equipment is great, but it all requires Wi-Fi if you want to take it that further, or it requires wiring. So I'm wondering, in reserve studies, you're really kind of guessing the future here though, right? You could have all this equipment it doesn't have to be just water monitoring. It could be fire monitoring, or it could be anything that is wired. Are you just going to build that into the reserve study 10 years down the road based on what's going on now with technology? Or are you going to make some guesses and say to yourself, you know what, we're not going to have to rewire this thing. 10 years from now, it's all going to be pure Wi-Fi.
No, we're only reflecting in a reserve study what exists now. So and we can only include components that exist in the current construction. So if it's something like your building doesn't currently have a monitoring system, but is planning to maybe install one next year, we can't put it in the reserve study because it doesn't currently exist. Once they install it, then it can be added to the study as a replacement for the future. But even that replacement for the future, the cost of that replacement is based on the current cost. Because we don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. They might have completely new and more advanced systems that might be much more expensive, less expensive. Just don't know. So
James, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'm sure that you're aware of all these things that are going to be down the pipeline, right? And they're probably going to save a bundle, and you're probably fairly confident that they're definitely going to happen at some point. But from what I'm hearing, just to make sure I understand it, as a rule of thumb for a reserve study, you're still not going to take that leap of faith, right? You're not going to try to predict the future. You're basically going to stay with what you know at the current moment. Is that accurate?
I think that's what we have to do. And just to piggyback on like the question about the Wi-Fi, so there are devices too out there where it may not be required. You may not have to do a full like wiring system as well. You can, if you're installing enough devices, kind of for the same purpose, there are options out there where it'll create a mesh network and they'll talk to each other, and then that'll talk back to a central point, and that may be just a plug in internet connection at a computer. So there's different options available depending on the type of system that you're looking at. But yeah, it's hard to, I have this discussion with Dave's team all the time where it's like we were looking at like a replacement cost, and we're thinking of like what the latest technology is, and well, they have to do the boiler in 10 years. They might want to use this type of boiler instead, but you're replacing the existing system, so you have to kind of figure on that. That if this is the old style boiler, then we're going to be replacing with an old style boiler. They may make the determination in the future to do something else for various reasons, and then they'll make an adjustment on the reserve study at that time.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad you brought it up, Dave, because if they're all these, I've never even thought about that. So thank you very much. All right. I want to thank you guys for being here. I was impressed how much stuff Andy knew. He really, I guess managers, they really do know a lot of stuff. Holy mackerel. So
yeah, he's pretty seasoned. He's been around the block.
All right. I'll thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for everybody that's still here. Bye, everybody.